The stars above flickered like dying embers as Kalura's battered starship plummeted through the atmosphere of an unknown planet. Smoke filled the cockpit, alarms blaring in a deafening chorus. Her hands gripped the controls tightly, knuckles white from strain. But it was no use. The ship was beyond saving. With one final jolt, the vessel crashed into a dense forest below, sending shards of metal and sparks flying in every direction. Kalura groaned, her body aching from the impact. She unbuckled herself with trembling hands and stumbled out of the wreckage, clutching a jagged piece of scrap metal for support. The air smelled strange, earthy and metallic at the same time, and the ground beneath her boots felt soft, almost spongy. All around her, towering trees stretched toward the sky, their leaves glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. It was beautiful yet eerie, a place that seemed untouched by civilization. But there was no time to marvel at the scenery. Behind her, the burning remains of her ship lit up the night, a beacon that would surely attract unwanted attention. And she knew exactly who, or what, was coming for her. The Verathi Syndicate didn't forgive easily, especially not when their secrets were stolen. Her hand instinctively moved to the pouch strapped to her side, where a small data crystal rested safely. That tiny device held information capable of toppling the Syndicate's empire, an empire built on lies, exploitation, and fear. If they caught her now, they wouldn't just kill her, they'd make sure she suffered first. Kalura staggered forward, each step sending sharp pains shooting through her leg. Blood trickled down her temple from a gash on her forehead, and her vision blurred intermittently. Still, she pushed on, driven by sheer willpower. She had trained for this moment her entire life, to fight back against those who sought to destroy her people. Giving up wasn't an option. As she trudged deeper into the forest, the glow of the bioluminescent trees grew brighter, casting an ethereal light over the landscape. Strange sounds echoed around her. Soft rustling, distant chirps, and the occasional low growl, but she paid them little mind. Her focus was singular. Survival. Every breath felt labored, every movement a battle against exhaustion. Yet despite the pain and fatigue, she pressed onward, determined to put as much distance between herself and the crash site as possible. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time seemed irrelevant now. Finally, her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the mossy ground near a shimmering lake. The water rippled gently, reflecting the glowing trees like a mirror. For a moment, she allowed herself to rest, staring up at the alien sky. Tears welled in her eyes as despair began to creep in. Was this how it ended? Alone, injured, and hunted. Just as darkness started to swallow her consciousness, a sound broke the silence, a soft crunch of footsteps on the forest floor. Kalura's heart raced as she fumbled for the makeshift weapon in her hand, ready to defend herself to the bitter end. But instead of the cold, calculating gaze of a Verathi assassin, she saw something else entirely. A figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in armor that shimmered like liquid silver under the moonlight. Their face was obscured by a sleek helmet, but their presence radiated calm authority. Without a word, the stranger scooped Kalura into their arms and carried her away from the lake, disappearing into the depths of the glowing forest. For the first time in days, Kalura let herself relax. Whoever this mysterious savior was, they had given her a second chance. A chance to survive, to fight another day. Little did she know, this encounter would change everything, for better or worse. The sanctuary's fragile peace shattered one fateful evening when the alarms blared, piercing through the stillness like a scream. Refugees scrambled to their feet, panic spreading like wildfire as shouts echoed through the underground halls. Kalura bolted upright from her cot, heart pounding in her chest. The sound was unmistakable. The Verathi Syndicate had found them. "They're here," someone yelled, their voice trembling with fear. They breached the perimeter. Kalura grabbed her makeshift weapon, a sharpened piece of metal she'd salvaged, and rushed toward the commotion. As she reached the main chamber, chaos reigned. Families huddled together, clutching whatever they could use for defense, while others worked frantically to barricade doors and seal escape routes. Amidst the turmoil stood Irindur, calm and unyielding, his silver armor gleaming under the dim lights. He held a sleek energy blade in one hand, its blue glow casting eerie shadows on the walls. "We don't have much time," he said, addressing the crowd. His voice cut through the noise like a knife, commanding attention. "Take the tunnels beneath the eastern wing. I'll hold them off long enough for you to get away." "No," Kaelura interjected, stepping forward. Her voice was firm despite the fear bubbling inside her. "You can't do this alone. If they catch us, we're all dead anyway." Irindur hesitated, studying her with those piercing gray eyes. Then, without a word, he nodded curtly. Together, they rallied a small group of volunteers, those brave enough to stay behind and fight. Among them were Lyra, who wielded a heavy plasma rifle, and a wiry young man named Tarek, whose quick reflexes made him an asset in close combat. The first wave of attackers struck with brutal efficiency. The Vairathi soldiers poured into the sanctuary like a flood, their black armor glinting menacingly in the low light. Energy blasts tore through the air, illuminating the cavernous space in flashes of red and orange. Kaelura ducked behind a fallen pillar, returning fire with precision, each shot fueled by desperation and rage. Beside her, Irindur moved like a shadow, his blade slicing through enemies with lethal grace. Watching him fight was like witnessing poetry in motion, every strike deliberate, every movement calculated. Despite their efforts, the odds were overwhelming. The Vairathi forces kept coming, relentless and merciless. Just when it seemed hopeless, Kaelura noticed something crucial. The enemy's focus was divided between attacking the sanctuary and securing access to the tunnels. They hadn't fully sealed off the eastern exit yet. "Lyra," she called out, gesturing toward the tunnel entrance. "Get everyone out now. We'll cover you." Lyra hesitated, torn between duty and survival. But then she nodded, shouting orders to the remaining refugees. One by one, they slipped into the darkness of the tunnels, carrying children and wounded comrades with them. Tarek stayed behind, firing bursts of energy to create a diversion. Kaelura fought side by side with Irindur, their backs pressed together as they faced wave after wave of enemies. She couldn't help but marvel at his skill. He anticipated every move, countered every attack, and never faltered. Yet there was something more profound in their partnership. It wasn't just coordination, it was trust. Without speaking, they communicated through instinct, each covering the other's blind spots. As the last of the refugees disappeared into the tunnels, Irindur turned to Kaelura. "It's time to go," he said, urgency in his tone. She nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Together, they retreated into the labyrinthine passages, leaving the Vairathi behind in disarray. Behind them, explosions rocked the sanctuary, collapsing parts of the structure to slow their pursuers. In the safety of the tunnels, Kaelura finally allowed herself to breathe, but only for a moment. The battle had forged a bond between her and Irindur, one that went beyond mere survival. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope, not just for herself, but for all those who had suffered under the Syndicate's tyranny. Whatever secrets Irindur carried, whatever legends surrounded him, one thing was certain: standing beside him, Kaelura believed they might actually stand a chance. Days passed in the sanctuary, and Kaelura grew stronger with each sunrise. Her wounds healed slowly but surely, thanks to Lyra's care and the strange herbal remedies brewed by the refugees. Yet despite her physical recovery, Kaelura couldn't shake the unease that lingered in her mind. Every time she looked at Irindur, her thoughts churned like a stormy sea. There was something about him, something just out of reach, that nagged at her instincts. He moved among the refugees with quiet authority, always watching, always listening, yet never fully engaging. It was as if he existed on the fringes of their world, neither part of it nor completely separate. One evening, While exploring the sanctuary, Kalara found herself drawn to a secluded corner where a group of refugees gathered around a flickering fire. The air smelled of roasted nuts and spiced tea, and laughter mingled with the soft crackle of flames. She hesitated for a moment before stepping closer, unsure if she should intrude. But when one of them noticed her presence and waved her over, she accepted the invitation, curious to learn more about these people who had taken her in. As she settled down beside them, the conversation shifted toward tales of survival and heroism. One man, an elderly Zinari with weathered skin and piercing blue eyes, began recounting stories of legendary figures from their shared history. His voice was deep and resonant, carrying a weight that silenced everyone around the fire. "Do you remember the Guardians of Orion?" he asked, his gaze drifting into the distance as though reliving old memories. "They were protectors, warriors who stood against tyranny long before any of us were born." Kalara leaned forward, intrigued. She'd heard fragments of such legends during her childhood, whispered by elders beneath starlit skies. The Guardians of Orion were said to be invincible, their armor gleaming like sunlight, their swords cutting through darkness itself. But they were only myths, weren't they? Stories meant to inspire hope in desperate times. "They say the last Guardian fell centuries ago," another refugee chimed in, shaking his head sadly. "Betrayed by those he trusted most. Some believe he died fighting. Others think he vanished, waiting for the right moment to return. And then there are the whispers," the old man added cryptically, lowering his voice. "Whispers of a lone figure clad in silver, appearing wherever oppression takes root. They call him Irinder." The name sent a shiver down Kalara's spine. She glanced around the circle, noticing how the others reacted. Some nodded solemnly, while others exchanged skeptical looks. Clearly, not everyone believed the legend. But Kalara couldn't dismiss it so easily. The description matched her mysterious savior perfectly. Later that night, unable to sleep, Kalara sought out Irinder. She found him standing alone near the edge of the sanctuary, gazing up at the stars. His silhouette was sharp against the glowing horizon, and for a moment, she simply watched him, hesitant to interrupt. "Why do they call you Irinder?" she asked finally, her voice cutting through the silence. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "It's a name I chose," he replied after a pause. "A way to leave the past behind. But the stories, they talk about someone like you. Someone called Caltherian, a guardian of Orion." At the mention of that name, Irinder tensed visibly. For the first time since meeting him, Kalara saw cracks in his stoic exterior. His jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened with emotion she couldn't quite decipher. Pain, regret, perhaps even anger. "That's enough," he said sharply, turning away. "Legends are dangerous things, Kalara. They give people false hope." But his reaction told her everything she needed to know. The pieces were falling into place, connecting dots she hadn't even realized were there. Irinder wasn't just some wandering protector. He was far more than that. And whatever secrets he carried, they were tied to the very legends her ancestors once revered. As she walked back to her quarters, Kalara felt a strange mix of fear and determination. If Irinder truly was a guardian of Orion, then his presence here wasn't coincidence, it was destiny. And she intended to uncover the truth, no matter what it cost. Kalara's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, she thought she was still dreaming. The room around her was dimly lit, its walls made of smooth stone that glowed faintly, as if infused with the same bioluminescence she'd seen in the forest. A soft hum filled the air, rhythmic and soothing, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. She blinked several times, trying to focus, but her mind felt foggy, weighed down by exhaustion and pain. Her body ached all over, though not as badly as before. Someone had tended to her wounds. Her leg was wrapped in clean bandages, and the gash on her forehead had been stitched up neatly. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't alone. As her vision cleared, Kalara noticed movement nearby. A group of people bustled about the room, tending to various tasks. They were an odd mix, some humanoid, others bearing features clearly alien, elongated limbs, shimmering skin, or even fur-covered bodies. Despite their differences, they moved with purpose, their expressions calm yet alert. These weren't soldiers or mercenaries. They were survivors. "Ah, you're awake," a voice said gently. Kalara turned her head to see a middle-aged woman approaching her bedside. Her hair was streaked with silver, and her face bore the lines of someone who had endured much but refused to break. "You've been out for nearly 2 days. We were starting to worry." "Where am I?" Kalara croaked, her throat dry. The woman handed her a cup of water, which Kalara sipped gratefully. "You're safe, for now," the woman replied. "This is one of our sanctuaries. My name is Lyra, and we take care of those who need refuge from certain dangers." She glanced meaningfully at the pouch strapped to Kalara's side, the one containing the data crystal. Kalara instinctively reached for it, ensuring it was still there. Seeing this, Lyra smiled faintly. "Don't worry. No one here will touch your belongings. That's not how we operate." Before Kalara could respond, another figure entered the room. It was him, the mysterious savior who had carried her away from the lake. He wore the same shimmering silver armor, though now it looked less imposing somehow, softened by the warm glow of the sanctuary. His helmet was gone, revealing a face that was striking but unreadable. Sharp cheekbones, piercing gray eyes, and a jawline carved from stone gave him an almost statuesque appearance. "This is Irindur," Lyra introduced. "He found you near the glowing lake and brought you here." Irindur nodded curtly, his expression unreadable. "You're lucky I happen to be nearby," he said in a low, measured tone. "The Varathi aren't known for mercy." At the mention of their name, Kalara stiffened. "They're coming for me," she whispered, panic rising in her chest. "If they find this place." "They won't," Irindur interrupted firmly. "Not while I'm here." His confidence unnerved her. Who was this man, or whatever he was? What did he want? And why did he seem so familiar, even though she was certain they had never met? Over the next few hours, Kalara learned more about the sanctuary and its inhabitants. They were refugees from across the galaxy, fleeing oppression, persecution, and violence. Some had lost entire families. Others had escaped slavery or imprisonment. Yet, despite their hardships, they worked together harmoniously, sharing resources and protecting one another. Irindur remained distant, rarely speaking unless necessary. When he did, his words were concise and deliberate, offering no insight into his past or motives. But Kalara couldn't shake the feeling that there was something about him, something important, that everyone else seemed to know except her. One evening, as she sat by a crackling fire with some of the other refugees, she overheard fragments of conversation. Names like Halthirian and phrases like the Last Guardian drifted through the air, spoken in hushed tones. Curiosity burned within her. Who exactly was Irindur? And why did his presence unsettle her so deeply? For now, answers would have to wait. The Varathi Syndicate was still out there, hunting her relentlessly. But deep down, Kalara knew one thing for certain. Irindur held secrets, secrets that might change everything. The plan was risky, almost suicidal, but Kalara knew there was no other choice. They couldn't keep running forever, and the Varathi Syndicate's forces were relentless. If they wanted any chance of survival or victory, they had to strike at the heart of the enemy's operations. That meant infiltrating one of their largest strongholds, a sprawling fortress built into the side of a mountain, bristling with weapons and guarded by an army of elite soldiers. Kalara stood in the dimly lit war room of their makeshift base, leaning over a holographic map projected onto a cracked stone table. The others, Lyra, Tarek, and even Irindur, gathered around her as she outlined the mission. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she pointed out key locations on the map. "We go in quiet," she began, her eyes scanning the group. "No unnecessary confrontations. Our goal is simple: disable their central command hub. Once we cut off their communications and power grid, the rest of the galaxy will see that the Syndicate isn't invincible." "And then what?" Tarek asked, his brow furrowed. "Even if we succeed, how does that stop them from coming after us again?" "It gives us time," Kelleher replied firmly. "Time to rally support, spread the truth about their crimes, and build alliances. But more importantly," she glanced at Arinder, who stood silently in the corner, arms crossed. "It sends a message. A message that the Guardians of Orion aren't gone. And neither are those who believe in their cause." Arinder met her gaze briefly before nodding once. A silent agreement. Despite his earlier reluctance, he seemed determined now, ready to face whatever came next. Kelleher felt a surge of gratitude for his presence, knowing they wouldn't stand a chance without him. The infiltration began under the cover of darkness. Dressed in stolen uniforms and armed with stolen gear, Kelleher and Arinder led a small team through the fortress's labyrinthine corridors. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. The tension was suffocating, but they pressed on, driven by desperation and purpose. Their progress was smooth. At first, they bypassed patrols, disabled security systems, and crept closer to the command hub. But as they approached their target, disaster struck. An alarm blared, piercing the silence like a scream. Red lights flashed overhead, bathing the halls in crimson hues. Within seconds, the fortress erupted into chaos. "Move!" Arinder barked, shoving Kelleher behind a stack of crates as energy blasts tore through the air. Soldiers swarmed toward them, weapons drawn. The team scattered, fighting desperately to hold their ground. Kelleher fought alongside Arinder, her movements fueled by adrenaline and fury. Each shot fired, each blow landed. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was personal. But even their combined skill couldn't match the sheer number of enemies closing in. One by one, members of their team fell until only Kelleher and Arinder remained. Cornered and outnumbered, Kelleher prepared for the worst, until a commanding voice cut through the din. "Well, well," sneered a figure stepping forward, clad in ornate black armor etched with the Syndicate's emblem. His voice dripped with mockery. "Caltherian, the last Guardian. I thought you'd disappeared into legend. How disappointing to find you clinging to scraps of your former glory." Kelleher froze, her blood turning cold. The name hit her like a punch to the gut. Caltherian *. The same name whispered in reverence by her ancestors. The same name tied to legends of bravery and sacrifice. And now, hearing it spoken aloud by the enemy, she realized the full weight of what Arinder truly represented. Beside her, Arinder stiffened, his expression unreadable yet tinged with something raw. Anger, pain, perhaps both. "You don't get to say my name," he growled, raising his blade. But Kelleher barely heard him. Her mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't fully understood before. This wasn't just about stopping the Syndicate. It was about reclaiming a legacy, and proving that hope could rise from ashes. As the battle raged around them, Kelleher made a decision. Whatever happened next, she would fight not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever believed in the Guardians of Orion. The tunnels beneath the sanctuary were narrow and suffocating, their damp walls slick with moisture that glistened faintly in the dim light of portable lanterns. Kelleher walked alongside Arinder, her mind racing as they navigated the winding passageways. Behind them, the distant rumble of collapsing structures echoed like thunder, a grim reminder of what they had left behind. The Verathi Syndicate would not give up easily. They never did. But for now, the refugees were safe. As they moved deeper into the labyrinth, Kelleher couldn't shake the image of Arinder in battle. His movements had been precise, almost otherworldly, as though every step and strike was guided by centuries of experience. And then there was his armor, its shimmering surface etched with symbols she recognized from ancient carvings. Symbols tied to the Guardians of Orion. Her curiosity burned hotter than ever. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to wait any longer. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded suddenly, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "About who you really are." Erindor stopped mid-step, turning to face her. His expression remained unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise. "What do you think I am?" he asked cautiously, his tone measured. "I think you're one of them," Kalara shot back, her voice rising despite herself. "A guardian of Orion. Don't deny it. I've seen the stories, heard the legends. They talk about Caltharion, the last of your kind. Is that you?" For a long moment, Erindor said nothing. He simply stared at her, his gaze piercing yet heavy with unspoken burdens. Finally, he exhaled slowly, as though releasing a weight he'd carried for far too long. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "That's my name, or it was. Caltharion. I was once part of the Guardians, sworn to protect peace across galaxies. But those days are gone." Kalara felt a strange mix of awe and anger bubbling inside her. "Gone? How can they be gone? You're still here. You could still fight." "It's not that simple," Erindor snapped, his composure cracking slightly. "The Guardians fell because we trusted allies who turned against us. Betrayal destroyed everything we stood for. Afterward, I disappeared. I thought it was over. But it's not over," Kalara insisted, stepping closer. Her voice softened, though her resolve didn't waver. "The Verathi Syndicate, they're building on the ruins of everything you fought for. Oppression, fear, control, it's all spreading again. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Erindor looked away, his jaw tightening. "Of course it means something," he muttered bitterly. "But fighting isn't enough. Every time I try, more lives are lost. More suffering follows. What good is protecting people if I can't stop the cycle?" Kalara shook her head, frustration welling up inside her. "That's not an excuse. You're letting the past chain you down when you could be using it to change the future. My ancestors, they revered the Guardians. They believed in what you stood for. If they knew you were alive, they'd expect me to save them," Erindor interrupted sharply, "to fix everything. But I'm not the hero they need anymore." "You don't get to decide that," Kalara fired back, her voice firm. "Maybe you're not the same person you used to be. Maybe you've made mistakes. But running away doesn't erase what you are, a symbol of hope. Whether you like it or not, people see that in you. See it." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. For the first time, Erindor seemed unsure, his usual stoicism faltering under the weight of her conviction. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, shouts erupted ahead. "We're close to the exit," Lyra called out, leading the group of refugees toward daylight filtering through cracks in the tunnel ceiling. Relief washed over everyone, even Erindor, as they emerged into the open air, greeted by the sight of rolling hills bathed in golden sunlight. Yet even as they caught their breath, Kalara knew the hardest battles lay ahead, not just against the Verathi, but within themselves. Erindor had carried the burden of his legacy alone for too long. Now it was time for him to share it, with her and with the galaxy. And deep down, she believed he was ready. The group of refugees settled in a hidden valley surrounded by towering cliffs, their new temporary refuge carved into the rugged terrain. It was far from ideal, exposed and vulnerable, but it would have to do until they could regroup and plan their next move. Kalara spent most of her time strategizing with Lyra and Tarek, poring over maps and discussing ways to strike back at the Verathi Syndicate. But no matter how many plans she devised, one thing remained clear. They needed more than just brute force to win this war. They needed something powerful enough to unite the scattered survivors across the galaxy. That's when Kalara turned her attention to Erindor, or rather, Caltharion. He had retreated to a secluded corner of the camp, avoiding conversation and keeping to himself as much as possible. She found him late one evening, sitting on a rocky ledge overlooking the valley, his silver armor glinting faintly under the light of two moons. His posture was rigid, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as though he were wrestling with thoughts too heavy to share. "You can't keep running," Kalara said softly, approaching him cautiously. "Not from them, and not from yourself." Arinder didn't respond immediately. Instead, he let out a slow breath, his shoulders sagging slightly. "What do you want me to say, Kalara? That I regret everything? That I wish I could go back and undo the mistakes that cost my people their lives?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation, "because regret isn't weakness. It's the first step toward redemption. You think hiding away makes you less responsible, but it doesn't. Every day you sit here doing nothing is another day the Syndicate grows stronger." He clenched his fists, anger flickering across his face. "And what do you propose I do? March into the heart of their empire and declare myself? That worked so well last time." "No," Kalara countered sharply. "I'm asking you to stop seeing yourself as just one man. You're more than that. You're a symbol. A living reminder of hope for everyone who's suffered under the Syndicate's rule. If we reveal who you are, if we show the galaxy that the Guardians of Orion still exist, we might inspire others to rise up." For a moment, Arinder looked tempted. Hope sparked briefly in his eyes before fading behind walls of doubt. "It's not that simple," he murmured. "People will expect things from me, things I don't know if I can deliver." "Then let us help you," Kalara insisted, stepping closer. Her voice softened, filled with conviction. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Together, we can rebuild what was lost. We can honor your legacy. And mine." Before Arinder could respond, shouts erupted from the center of the camp. Scouts had returned with urgent news. The Veyrathi forces were closing in faster than expected. Panic spread among the refugees, but Kalara remained calm, her mind racing through options. This wasn't the time for hesitation. It was time to act. She turned back to Arinder, her expression resolute. "If you won't fight for yourself, then fight for them. Fight for all the people who've been crushed by the Syndicate. Fight for everyone who believes in the stories of the Guardians." Arinder stared at her, torn between resistance and resolve. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of his decision. "But we do this your way. And if it fails—" "It won't," Kalara interrupted firmly, cutting off his doubts. "Trust me." With that, they hurried back to the camp, ready to prepare their stand. As dawn broke over the valley, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Kalara felt a surge of determination. This battle wouldn't just be about survival, it would be about reclaiming the future. But little did she know, the true test was yet to come. The night was unusually quiet in the small farming town where Marcus Grayson lived. The only sounds came from crickets chirping and the occasional rustle of leaves as a breeze swept through the fields. Marcus, a reclusive botanist with a knack for fixing broken things, be it machinery or wilting plants, was tending to his greenhouse when he noticed something strange. A faint glow flickered beyond the edge of the woods that bordered his property. At first, he thought it might be moonlight reflecting off a puddle, but the light moved in an odd, pulsating rhythm. Curiosity got the better of him. Grabbing a flashlight and a wrench, just in case, Marcus stepped out into the cool night air. The glow grew brighter as he approached the tree line, its source hidden behind thick bushes. His heart pounded, not out of fear, but excitement. He had always dreamed of seeing something extraordinary, though he never imagined it would happen here, on this ordinary patch of earth. Pushing aside the branches, Marcus froze. There, lying on the damp forest floor, was a creature unlike anything he'd ever seen. Its skin shimmered like liquid metal, shifting colors with every shallow breath it took. Delicate wings, translucent and crystalline, fluttered weakly at its back, emitting soft bursts of light. But what struck Marcus most was the wound, a jagged burn marring its side, still smoking slightly. Whatever this being was, it was hurt, and badly. For a moment, Marcus hesitated. Should he call someone? Report it? What asterisk was asterisk it, exactly? Alien? Machine? Something else entirely? His mind raced with questions, but one thing was clear. Leaving it there wasn't an option. Kneeling beside the creature, he spoke softly, though he doubted it understood. "I'm going to help you," he murmured, more to reassure himself than anything else. The creature's eyes, a deep, swirling blue, opened just enough to meet his gaze. It didn't seem hostile, only frightened and exhausted. Carefully, Marcus slid his arms under its surprisingly light body and lifted it. The wings folded gently against its back as he carried it back to his house, the glow they emitted casting eerie shadows on the ground. Inside, Marcus laid the creature on a makeshift bed of blankets in his workshop. He rummaged through his supplies, grabbing antiseptic wipes, bandages, and tools he hoped might work. As he cleaned the burn, he couldn't help but marvel at the texture of its skin. It felt warm, almost alive, yet unlike anything human. Every so often, the creature let out a low hum, which Marcus interpreted as either pain or gratitude. Either way, it spurred him to keep going. By the time he finished patching up the wound, dawn was breaking outside. Exhausted but satisfied, Marcus sat down nearby, watching the creature sleep. Its wings pulsed faintly, lighting up the room in gentle waves. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a spark of purpose. Little did he know, this act of kindness would lead to far more than he could have ever imagined. And somewhere deep within the glowing being, a seed of trust began to grow.